All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we're going deep into the world of spies and secrets. We're talking about the intelligence partnership between the U.S. and Ukraine.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that sounds like it came straight out of a spy novel.
Seriously. We're going to try and figure out how this alliance even happened, how it actually works, and what it means for the whole situation with Russia and Ukraine.
And we've got some amazing material to work with.
Right. We've got these excerpts from articles in the New York Times and ABC News.
And they really lay bare how this whole partnership works.
The crazy thing is, this isn't something new because of the war.
Not at all. This goes back years.
Way back.
All the way to 2014.
It's 2014, after Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity.
Ukraine was in a tough spot back then.
Yeah, I bet.
Their intelligence service, the SBU, was a mess. Defections, compromised agents, they were lacking resources.
They needed help, basically.
Desperate for it. And the CIA saw a chance
To step in.
to create a partnership, one that would help both of them.
So it wasn't like an instant buddy-buddy situation.
Oh, no, definitely not. Both sides were cautious. Lots of mistrust to get over.
Makes sense.
They had to figure out if they could even work together.
Plus, wasn't the U.S. trying to smooth things over with Russia around that time?
Exactly. Treading carefully was a must.
But then, in 2015, things changed, right?
Yeah, big time.
There was this general, Valery Kondratyuk,
Head of Ukrainian military intelligence at the time.
and he flies to Washington. But he doesn't bring the usual gift.
He brings backpacks.
Backpacks full of what?
Classified Soviet and Russian military documents. We're talking weapons plans, intel reports, troop movements.
The kind of stuff intelligence agencies drool over.
You got it.
That's a serious statement right there. It's like, we're all in. What did the CIA think about that?
Impressed, to say the least. Kondratyuk showed them Ukraine was serious, willing to take risks, and they had the goods to back it up.
So that's when the real trust started to build.
You could say that. It paved the way for a much deeper collaboration.
And that collaboration got pretty intense. The U.S. put in millions, training Ukrainian officers, giving them high-tech gear.
They even set up secret bases all over Ukraine.
Seriously.
About 20 of them, according to the reports.
Wow. Some were practically under Russia's nose.
Yeah, absolutely.
These weren't just for listening in either, right?
Nope, they were hubs for all sorts of covert operations, gathering real-time intel on what Russia was up to.
Talk about being in the middle of the action.
One base near the Russian border had a direct line to CIA headquarters in Langley.
No way. So they weren't just gathering info, they were becoming operational.
Totally. And then there's this program.
Lay it on me.
It was called Operation Goldfish.
Okay, now that's a cool name. I'm intrigued. What was that all about?
Basically, they trained Ukrainian officers to act like Russians.
Whoa, seriously?
Language, mannerisms, tactics, everything.
Like creating a mirror image of Russian intelligence.
Yeah.
So they could blend in.
You got it. And potentially run missions abroad, disrupt things outside of Ukraine.
That's some next level thinking. And it means the trust between the CIA and Ukrainian intelligence had gotten pretty strong, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. This kind of thing, you only do it if you really believe in the partnership.
Makes sense. But it wasn't just about bases and training, right?
No, they also cultivated relationships with some key people.
People who really knew the Russian threat inside and out.
Exactly. Like General Sergei Dvortsov.
He's the head of Ukrainian intelligence now, right?
That's him. And Kirilo Budanov.
He leads their military intelligence.
Yep. And he was actually trained by the CIA. Shows how close they'd become.
Wow. So you've got these bases, covert ops, and personal connections, all focused on countering Russia. But how did Putin see all of this?
Well, he knew about the U.S. and Ukraine getting closer.
I can't imagine he was thrilled.
He wasn't. Saw it as a direct threat to Russia. He even used it to justify some of his actions.
Saying the West was using Ukraine as a pawn.
That's right. Encroaching on Russia's sphere of influence, the whole 9 yards.
But as we've been discussing, this partnership was driven by Ukraine's own need for security.
Right, and a shared interest in pushing back against Russian aggression.
So how much of what Putin's saying is real concern versus just trying to make himself look good?
No, that's the question, isn't it? It's clear Putin sees Ukraine as vital to Russia, historically and strategically.
And he's always trying to maintain control there.
Absolutely. And Ukraine strengthening ties with the West, especially on the intelligence front, directly challenged that.
Made him feel threatened.
For sure.
So it's important to remember this wasn't the U.S. forcing Ukraine into anything.
No, not at all. Ukraine made its own choices.
They wanted to defend themselves.
Exactly. And this partnership was built on shared interests, mutual benefit, and that growing trust we talked about.
And that trust led to some seriously valuable intel, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Our sources say Ukraine gave the U.S. tons of information on Russian military plans, new tech, cyber warfare strategies, even what was going on inside the Kremlin.
It was remarkable, really. Gave the U.S. and its allies a view into Russia that they'd never had before. Helped them understand Russia's capabilities, intentions, and weaknesses.
It's crazy to think about. Back in 2013, way before the current war,
Yeah.
Ukrainian intelligence helped the U.S. uncover Russian agents operating right here in America.
That's right. And when the invasion happened in 2022, Ukrainian intelligence was crucial. They gave real-time info on troop movements, planned attacks, the weapons Russia was using.
That intel must have been critical for Ukraine's defense, right?
Absolutely. And it allowed the West to give Ukraine the right support.
So it's not just knowing what the enemy is doing, it's using that to actually change the game.
Exactly. This intelligence advantage gave Ukraine a fighting chance against a much bigger opponent. They could make strategic choices, target key things, and disrupt Russian operations, all things they couldn't have done without this partnership.
So it's amazing how this careful partnership grew into this powerful force. But I imagine there were some bumps along the way.
Oh, there were definitely moments of tension. Times when the U.S. and Ukraine didn't see eye to eye.
Like what kind of disagreements?
Well, the Ukrainians, facing a threat to their very existence, were willing to take risks. Risks the U.S., with its global concerns, might have seen as too dangerous.
So Ukraine was ready to push the envelope a bit further.
You could say that.
What kind of risks are we talking about?
There were reports of assassinations, sabotage, things that went beyond just gathering intelligence, things the U.S. wasn't always comfortable with.
So Ukraine, in their fight for survival, sometimes went further than the U.S. wanted them to.
That's a fair assessment. And this difference in how much risk each side was okay with, it caused friction. The U.S. was trying to balance their support for Ukraine with their bigger goals.
And not wanting to make Russia even angrier.
Exactly. It's a tough line to walk.
It really shows how intelligence gathering has changed. It's not just traditional spying anymore.
It's about partnerships, technology, and sometimes doing things that aren't by the book, especially in a world where war and peace aren't so clear-cut.
So we've seen how this partnership began, the key people involved, the risks they took, and what they gained. But what does this all mean on a bigger scale? How has this intel sharing really affected the situation in Ukraine and the U.S.-Russia relationship? That's what we're going to get into right after this. So we've uncovered this U.S.-Ukraine intelligence partnership that's been going on for years, getting stronger and more operational. It had its rough patches, with some differences on how much risk was okay, but the impact, that's what really matters. How has this flow of info played out in the real world?
That's where things get really interesting. The intelligence Ukraine's provided, it's been a game changer for their resistance against the Russian invasion. It's given them and their allies a level of understanding into Russian operations that would be impossible to get otherwise.
So it's like having insider information, almost like you're predicting your opponent's moves in a chess match.
Exactly. Ukraine has been able to anticipate Russian movements, even preempt some attacks. They've targeted key Russian assets, disrupted communications, and made things incredibly difficult for the invaders.
And you mentioned the allies benefiting too. How's this intel helped the bigger effort to support Ukraine?
Well, it's allowed the West to provide aid that's much more effective and targeted. They know what weapon systems Russia's using, their tactics, their weak points logistically. So the allies have been able to supply Ukraine with the exact tools and training to counter those specific threats.
Instead of just sending whatever they have, it's about sending the right things for the situation.
That's the idea. And this intelligence has also been vital in the information war that's running alongside the actual fighting.
It's something I hadn't really considered. What role does intelligence play in that kind of fight?
Think about it. By exposing Russian disinformation campaigns, providing evidence of war crimes, and highlighting the reality of what Russia's doing, Ukraine and its allies can push back against the narratives Putin's trying to create.
So it's about winning battles on the ground, but also winning over hearts and minds around the world.
Precisely. It's about shaping how the entire conflict is perceived. And that brings us to the larger picture. The long-term impact of this partnership on the relationship between the U.S. and Russia, it's definitely changed things.
In what ways? Fill us in.
Well, for starters, it's revealed some weaknesses in Russian intelligence. They had a reputation for being formidable, right? But the U.S. and Ukraine have been able to get into their network so effectively.
It's like they pulled back the curtain and the wizard isn't as powerful as everyone thought.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, it really highlights how effective U.S. intelligence can be, particularly when it comes to building these partnerships and using them to achieve strategic goals.
It shows that 21st century intelligence isn't just solo missions anymore. It's about collaboration, sharing, and really understanding the global scene.
Absolutely. This whole partnership is a model for how the U.S. can work with allies to counter adversaries in this crazy, complicated world we live in. It combines traditional espionage with new technology and, as we've seen, some less conventional methods.
But it also makes things riskier, doesn't it? The rivalry between the U.S. and Russia, it feels more intense with this whole intelligence war going on.
Without a doubt. The Kremlin, they see this as a direct threat, and they'll react somehow. It's just hard to know exactly how. This level of uncertainty, the potential for things to escalate, it's definitely worrying.
So we're left with a lot of unknowns.
That's the reality. This partnership has been a game changer, but it's also opened a can of worms, new challenges, new uncertainties.
Which leads to the big question, what's next? What does the future hold for this secret intelligence partnership? Will it keep getting stronger, change somehow, or maybe even fall apart under the pressure of everything going on in the world?
All valid questions. We can't predict the future, but let's consider some possibilities. One is that this partnership becomes even more embedded. More intelligence sharing, joint operations, even closer coordination when it comes to making strategic decisions.
Basically, taking it to the next level, making Ukraine a truly essential part of the U.S. intelligence network.
Exactly. It might involve giving Ukraine even more advanced tech, better training, deeper access to intelligence resources. It could even mean they start making decisions together, blurring the lines between the two intelligence services.
But wouldn't that really tick off Russia? Wouldn't that risk making things much worse?
It's a gamble, no doubt, but the U.S. might decide that having such a strong partner in a strategically important region is worth the risk.
It's like a high-stakes poker game, figuring out how far you can push without making your opponent go all in. So deeper integration is one possibility. What are some other ways this could go?
Another scenario is that it becomes more of a team effort. Imagine other countries joining this intelligence partnership, especially those in Eastern Europe who are worried about Russia.
Creating an intelligence alliance, pooling resources, and presenting a united front against Russian aggression.
Exactly. Sharing intelligence, running joint training exercises, coordinating responses to any provocations from Russia, it could become a powerful deterrent.
There's power in numbers, for sure. But there's also the chance that this partnership weakens or even completely falls apart.
That's always a risk, especially in international relations. Things change quickly. A change in leadership in the U.S. or Ukraine, shifting political goals, even just a loss of trust. Any of those things could really change the relationship.
And then there are the things you can't predict. A major global event, a sudden crisis, a shift in the balance of power.
Right. Anything could happen that completely changes the game. And we can't forget that Russia might try to sabotage the partnership. Think disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, even trying to create tension between the U.S. and Ukraine.
So the future of this intelligence partnership is up in the air. It's a story that's still being written.
What we do know is that this partnership has had a huge impact on the conflict in Ukraine, on the relationship between the U.S. and Russia, and on global intelligence as a whole. Going forward, we need to understand what's happening, the different ways things could play out, and the high stakes involved.
You've given us a lot to think about. It reminds us that the world of intelligence is rarely clear-cut. It's all about alliances, rivalries, changing interests, and this U.S.-Ukraine partnership, it's a perfect example of how complicated it can be.
It also shows that intelligence isn't just about collecting secrets. It's about seeing the big picture, understanding threats, and making smart decisions based on the best information you have.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into this secret world of the U.S.-Ukraine intelligence partnership. It's a story of risk, intrigue, high-stakes maneuvering, and it's still going on. We hope this has given you some insight into what's shaping the world and how important intelligence is in these uncertain times.
Kay always encouraged you to keep exploring, questioning, and looking at things from different angles. The world of intelligence is constantly changing, and it's important for all of us to stay informed and engaged.
So until next time, stay curious and stay sharp.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think about. This partnership starts off almost in secret, and then it becomes this major force in world affairs. We've talked about how it began and where it stands now, but what about the road ahead? Where could things go from here?
That's the question everyone wants to know, right? As we've been talking about, there are a few different paths this could take. One possibility is this partnership gets even tighter, even more integrated.
So Ukraine essentially becoming like an arm of U.S. intelligence, a key outpost right on the front line.
Exactly. Think even more intelligence sharing, more joint operations, maybe even a level of coordination on strategy that we haven't seen before.
So, like the U.S. giving Ukraine even more advanced tech, more training, and deeper access to all those intel resources.
Right. It could even get to the point where they're practically making decisions together, blurring the lines between the two.
But wouldn't that be a huge provocation to Russia? Wouldn't that risk making the whole situation way worse? Of course, it's a risk, no doubt. But the U.S. might decide that the benefit of having such a close, capable partner right there in that critical region, that outweighs the risk.
It's like a constant calculation.
Yeah.
How far can you push things without setting off a chain reaction? So deeper integration is one path. What other scenarios are we looking at?
Well, it could also become more of a team effort. Think about other countries joining in, particularly those in Eastern Europe who are also worried about Russia.
So creating an intelligence alliance, pooling resources, presenting a united front.
Exactly. Imagine this. They're sharing intel, conducting joint training exercises, coordinating their responses to any kind of move Russia makes. That would send a strong message.
There's definitely strength in numbers. But, and I hate to even say it, what about the possibility of things going the other way? What if this partnership weakens or even, and I can't believe I'm saying this, falls apart?
You have to consider it. It's always a risk in the world of international relations. Things can change on a dime, a change in leadership in the U.S. or Ukraine, shifting political priorities, even just a loss of trust. Any of that could really shake things up.
And then there are the things you can't predict. Some major global event, a crisis no one saw coming, a sudden shift in the balance of power. Anything could happen to change the whole game.
Exactly. Plus, you can't rule out Russia actively trying to sabotage the partnership. Disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, trying to sow discord between the U.S. and Ukraine.
Trying to drive a wedge between them.
Exactly. Russia has a lot of tools at their disposal.
So basically, we're saying the future of this intelligence partnership is a big question mark.
It's a story that's still being written. A lot can happen.
But one thing is clear. This partnership has had a massive impact on the war in Ukraine, the relationship between the U.S. and Russia, and the entire landscape of global intelligence.
Absolutely. And as we move forward, it's crucial that we keep our eyes open, understand the forces at play, the different ways things could go, and what's really at stake here. This is high-stakes stuff.
This has been an eye-opening conversation, really makes you think. The world of intelligence, it's rarely simple, is it?
Not at all. It's this complex web of alliances, rivalries, constantly shifting interests. And the U.S.-Ukraine partnership, it really shows just how complicated things can get.
It's also a reminder that intelligence isn't just about gathering secrets.
Right. It's about seeing the big picture, understanding the threats, and making those strategic decisions with the best information you can get.
Well, folks, there you have it. Our deep dive into the secret world of the U.S.-Ukraine intelligence partnership. A story of risk, intrigue, those high-stakes moves, and it's still unfolding. We hope this has given you a glimpse into the forces shaping our world and how intelligence plays a role in all of this.
It's a complicated world out there. We encourage you to keep digging deeper, questioning things, looking at things from different angles. The intelligence game is always in motion.
That's great advice. So until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and thanks for joining us.